We're into a really exciting part of the episode now. It's headlined here behind the scenes, and there's about 5 yarns here that I want to ask you about, and it's about artists, and it's about the stuff that I'm certainly interested in. Can you tell us first of all about Chance the Rapper? I've heard that he was one of your most memorable artists you've had.
Yeah, Chance, probably still the biggest act we've had, although we've got Central C coming this year, who's hitting his straps as an international artist, and I think he will challenge Chance's mantle as probably the hottest act we've ever had. And it was a great booking. We'd been talking to him for a few years about getting him. This Chicago rapper had a mixtape. He was starting to make waves, but I think we booked him in April that year. By November, he was the hottest thing in the industry. He was at the White House. He was mates with Obama. He'd gone from, just a Chicago rapper to A-list superstar. And with that came all the bells and whistles of hosting these kind of talent. And his agent, I remember, said he'll need a private jet to Gisborne. And we said, I don't think there's private jets in this country,
How many times have you been asked that about a private jet?
And the agent said, that's fine. He just won't turn up at the show. They don't know what pencil planes are. They travel from Las Vegas to Chicago to New York in private jets. So we ran around and provided that. I think there's 3 of these jets in New Zealand that can cater for this kind of talent. He came down. His team took over the whole backstage production. They had their own passes. They took over the house as a private area. We couldn't even get in backstage at one point because they'd changed all the tags.
Seriously?
It became a Chance the Rapper concert.
Wow.
He had 20 of his team in tow, but he put on the best performance. He stayed on for another 20 minutes after the show. He loved it so much. But one of his requests was a cheeseburger with no condiments that he likes to have before he goes on stage. So,
like meat and cheese and bread.
Exactly. No pickles, and he needs it fresh. So one of our team just pinned it to Gisborne McDonald's to have that waiting for him before he went on stage, but it was left untouched in this dressing room. So I think they do that just to show that you're paying attention, you're working at a world-class level.
When you meet someone like that, do you go, hi, Chance? Like, how do you meet the artist?
Mr. Rapper.
Yeah.
I try to get around the artist. I'm probably more attached to the tour manager and the manager or agent. That's more who I'm dealing with. I mean, musicians are there to do their job, and they tend to be in a bit of a zone, and quite private. But he was having the time of his life. I mean, this guy was 22, 23, the toast of the music industry, and on the other side of the world, having people sing his songs back to him, and he just had an absolute ball. As it turns out, he missed his jet flight back to Auckland, and he was found at the airport with all the rest of the dregs and the George FM DJs getting our charter flight, which is this old DC-3 propeller plane back to Auckland. So it was quite humbling for the lad, but probably, the biggest star we've had at the time, and I think Central C this year will compete with that.
Because you talk about pencil plane, Pharrell, did Pharrell come down on a I guess it's Air New Zealand? Correct. Is it one seat on each side?
Yeah.
First time I imagine he's not seen the inside of a private jet.
And it was the days, I think we had a hurricane or a storm, and it was super windy, and his son was on another flight coming down. And Pharrell didn't have the best experience in Gisborne. He was woken up a couple of times by the Edge radio station doing prank calls. So he was pretty salty getting on stage, didn't have much time.
That doesn't help you in your situation, right, when you're getting radio stunts with some of your biggest acts.
No, but it's a great leveler flying into Gisborne.
I guess Gisborne's a good leveler, full stop.
Driving in, flying in. You got to pick your bags off the tractor, and there's kind of tumbleweeds on the airport. And, acts like we had Eric Murillo, who's was a big superstar DJ from Ibiza. He was there coming off the plane with his sunnies on and just popping up in little old Gisborne. It's
Cal Cox in Gisborne, like those sorts of things are phenomenal.
To the riders, so I mean that one was sort of like a bit of a test, but quite a basic one. You must have heard of some ridiculous stories from riders from big concerts, but have there also been do you have any good stories from them, but also have there been any other like memorable rider requests from R&B?
We got close with Snoop Dogg one year, and I remember his demands were quite excessive. And a lot of it's just keeping the crew happy. And, it's the fried chicken when they come off on stage, and it's, they've got all their mates touring with them, and school friend's the T-shirt guy, and their wife's the
Do you have to pay
manager.
for all those people to come?
So our deals are landed in Gisborne, so we'll look after everything on site. We negotiate the accommodation. Often we push back on that because we've got limits in Gisborne, but we'll sort out their transfers and their hospitality on site. And but getting to and from the country is generally their cost. So if they're making more money, they've got more friends in tow. But yeah, I can't remember specifically. I remember Moby was probably one of the more particular artists we've had. He's quite a famous vegan and animal rights activist, and he's quite a precocious kind of guy. And it's often the team around them as well. They have these tour managers that are wrap the artists in cotton wool, and they just don't want anything out of line. So the artist can get grumpy. So our team, Josh and the team who hosts the artists, they work really hard to detail everything. Has to be perfect to ensure that the artist doesn't get grumpy.
On the flip side, are there any artists that you've encountered that are just really down to earth and really normal and really cool?
Yeah, a lot of them, I think. Yeah, Carl Cox he's a legend. He's so humble, such a nice guy. The acts like Netsky and Wilkinson that we've had at the festival, they become family. They know the team, they know the crowd, they know the ins and outs. They've become really good friends of the festival. So, yeah, Kiwi artists. I mean, everyone's so grateful for the experience at Rhythm and Vines, and no one's bigger than the brand. Sounds cliche, but people are there for their New Year's experience. They're not necessarily there to see one act. So artists can't really kind of walk around like it's theirs.
Public Enemy,
you've taken the words out of my mouth.
An amazing group to bring out and just to be responsible for getting them to New Zealand.
Flav and Chuck D.
I've heard there might be a good yarn about the porphyry they received.
Oh, that was a pretty special moment flying them in. And again, they arrived in a charter flight into little old Gisborne Airport, and they poured out. There must have been about 14 of them. And that's a classic case of school friends doing the merch. And, there's Flavor Flav and Chuck D and a group of dancers, but they had all their bros in tow, and they rolled off this plane straight to the cafe, loaded up with pies, chips, Coke. Flavor Flav came up to me wearing his clock, and he's like, "Yo, Hamish!"
Oh, Jay's gone. So sorry.
We're all gone. We're all gone.
Got him.
Oh, God, sorry. Flavor Flav wearing his clock.
Back in.
Clock in little old Gisborne. He's like, "Yo, Hamish, step into my office." And I'm like, "Where's he talking about?" And he's like pointing outside to his office. So we get in a huddle outside the Gisborne airport. He's like, "Yo, Hamish, I gotta find some weed, bro. I'm gonna fucking die." So the poor guy had probably flown 24 hours from New York without a smoke, and he was at the end of his tether. And I said, "Look, Flav, we don't have time for that. We've got a special porphyry welcome." And we had to herd the crew up like herding cats, getting them on the bus straight to the porphyry to the marae. And it was probably one of the most humbling experiences I've ever been part of. These Brooklyn gangsters coming off the plane, all bling, all bravado, walking onto that marae and getting that traditional Māori welcome was something so special. And Flavor just dropped his guard completely. Chuck D, who's one of the great lyricists and poets of our time, was able to retort to the warm welcome, and they both said they had never felt such a warm greeting from a country on the other side of the world. So seeing those egos brought down to life in little old Gisborne was something I'll never forget.
Did you get him that weed afterwards? I'm sure Gizzy would have hooked him up there.
We've also got a yarn about, speaking of flights, a group of international artists that I think the flight was cancelled back to Auckland, and they had to be rerouted via Napier and stopped in at your parents' house for a cup of tea and some dress-ups.
Yeah, that's right. 1 year, 2012, we had Scream and Benga, and this dubstep scene was the toast of the industry, and we had all these scallywags down in Gisborne for New Year's Eve, and they all fly on. We work with Field Days in Sydney, New Year's Day. They often fly.
Field Days in Hamilton. I was thinking, that's an interesting crossover.
Good collab.
They all fly to Sydney on the 1st, but that particular night, flights were cancelled out of Gisborne. And I was getting texts from the promoter in Sydney saying, "Get my artists to Sydney or the wheels are going to fall off." So we had to, again, herd these cats. and get them in the get them in the vans. Ross, my father, had took a load of them. Even Mum was going to step up at one stage. They were just pissed up chooks, driving over the Gisborne Ranges to Napier to get their flight out the next morning. And yeah, Ross and Viv hosted them at our house, so they were having cups of tea and trying on different costumes and having a ball to see in their new year down in Napier.
Heard one of them was put, because your dad's a long-standing, quite prolific copper, and they're putting on his police gear.
Yeah, they were having a ball. So it was all, I mean, that's rock and roll, isn't it? Dad said they were great company going over the ranges for 2 or 3 hours, drinking in the back. You know, artists just love it coming to New Zealand. The rolling hills, the hospitality, the audiences are so warm, the people are so warm, and Rhythm and Vines has been able to put on the map, has been able to be, you know, showcased for that reason, and it's something we're really proud of.